Hello and welcome to yet another live session here at TutorAC. This live session is another very interesting session that we are trying to create here at TutorAC to help you understand another very important and interesting skill into the market as of now. This market is very interesting, and whenever we talk about IT industry, we cannot stop talking about software applications. And now that we look into software applications, we definitely try to understand that there are different types of software applications that are present in today's world. A few of different types of software applications would include something like web applications, mobile applications, desktop applications, and so on and on and on. Today, whatever we are trying to cover is very specifically focused on the ideas of web application. This web application development can further be divided into two major parts. One is called as back-end development and the other is called as front-end development. So any single time you see somebody who says that they are a web developer, they might fall into either of these two categories or maybe even both of these two categories. So whenever we talk about both of these two categories, we always start to think about making something like a web application, like I already just mentioned. And inside this web application, we have to think about two major components, like I just told you, which is going to be backend engineering and front-end engineering. So what is backend engineering and what is front-end engineering? And how are these two topics related to Angular, which is technically the topic that we are going to discuss about today? So Angular, whenever we say this word, we have to understand that Angular falls into the category of front-end engineering. Okay. So what is front-end engineering? If we have to talk about front-end engineering, it is about creating your web applications UI. Now, whenever we talk about UI, it definitely needs an understanding that the way your application is going to look, the way it's going to feel, how fast it's going to be, all of these things are going to fall under the category of front-end engineering. So the ideas of making sure that your application looks good, behaves nicely, gives a very good user experience, and also remains fast, these type of categories or these type of activities are what are done inside front-end engineering. In today's world, there are two very major players in the world of front-end engineering. And these two players are called as React and Angular. They both are very complementary technologies to each other, but this video is completely focused on Angular. So now let us try to understand what is exactly Angular. Angular is a framework which is completely designed for very modern level front-end application development. It is designed by the company Google and it is currently maintained also by Google. It is open source in nature and therefore can be used by any developer in this world free of cost. So what does Angular do and how it becomes, or how did it even become such an amazing thing in today's world? Angular provides very amazing level of development support on the internet. Secondly, it is very easy to develop very top-notch applications on Angular, which it would not be possible to develop otherwise. So these are a few reasons why Angular started to emerge a lot into the market and even today remains very prevalent inside the market situations. Learning Angular skills can land you a job very quickly because of its high demand. Let us try to talk about Angular in terms of more technical concepts. Whenever we talk about front-end engineering, it just goes unnoticed that we have to talk about things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There is no front-end technology inside the web which runs on something other than HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in today's world. So these are three basic fundamentals whenever it comes to web development, especially the front-end development. So now that we understand that these are three pillars of front-end development, so inside these three pillars, we need to understand what each of these pillars is going to do. So in the most simplest language, HTML is like the skeleton of your website, about what is the structure of your website, how elements are going to be placed and so on. Whereas CSS is beautification of your website. Whereas JavaScript controls the behavior of that website. So these are the three major pillars of any front-end development. When we talk about Angular, Angular tries to create something called as a virtual DOM on top of the front end that we are trying to see and manipulates that virtual DOM. So we are easily able to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or in Angular's case, in some cases, TypeScript code in order to develop our front end application. Whenever we talk about very old type of web applications, we will always notice something known as real DOM. So whenever your JavaScript application is going to run, it is actually going to make the modifications into the real DOM. But whenever we talk about something modern, for example Angular, they don't make modifications into the real DOM. They make modifications into something called as the virtual DOM, because of which any element you want to modify, only that specific element will be modified instead of modifying the entire page, which is why it becomes very, very efficient and fast. So now that we have spoken a little bit about the properties of Angular, let us try to go into more technicalities of Angular and also try to create our very first Angular application. In this particular live session, I will also try to help you understand how you can create your very first Angular application, help you set up all the relevant things that you might need inside your computer to write your first Angular application. Let's go ahead and see how this can be done. Because Angular runs on JavaScript, or in this case TypeScript, you will need to know the knowledge of HTML, CSS and JavaScript or TypeScript depending on in which language you write your Angular code. In most cases, you will see Angular code written in TypeScript programming language. So in case if you know JavaScript, you can add a little bit of syntactical sugar on top of it and make it TypeScript. So you will need, for this particular video, a little bit knowledge on HTML, CSS and TypeScript. Now let's go ahead and create our very first Angular application. And before that, we will go ahead and see what are the minimal requirements that we have or that we need to have in order to create our very first Angular application. Okay, so coming back to my screen, I will open my browser firstly. Let me close all the relevant tabs. Okay, let me close all the irrelevant tabs that I have. Okay, so the first thing that I want to actually check is, or I want to download, is something called as Node.js. So as you can see, I've made a search for Node.js. You will see something called as download Node.js LTS. Or if you go to this website, nodejs.org/en, go to the download section and you will be able to see different ways of downloading your Node.js application. So this is giving a curl based system, but what you can also do is you can just go to nodejs.org/en and then click on this button. This will download Node.js on your system. In my case, I am not downloading it any further because in my case, the application is already installed. Whether you're on Windows, Linux or Mac, especially on Mac, if you need to select whether you're using an ARM64 chip, that is an Apple Silicon chip, or whether you're using an Intel based Mac. So make sure that you select the right Node.js package for yourself and install it on your system. After installing it, you should open your terminal. In case if you are on Windows, you can open PowerShell or command prompt. In my case, I will open my terminal. And after opening my terminal, I just need to run one command in order to check whether my Node.js is successfully installed on my system or not. So I will write node space -v. And as soon as I press enter or return, it returns me with 20.12.1, which means it is successfully installed on my system. While when we were trying to download it, the current latest version at the time of making this video is 20.13.1. So I am not very behind in terms of Node.js version, but had I been around Node.js 18 or 16, I would have instantly gone and downloaded the newer version and installed it. You might also need to check one more thing for something called as npm space -v. This gives you a version of npm which comes packaged along with Node.js. So as soon as you install Node.js on your machine, you will see that npm has also been installed on your machine, and we usually run both of these two commands in order to check whether all the installation was done properly or not. Okay, great. So now that we have both of these two things onto our system, the next thing that we are going to do is basically trying to install or create our very first Angular application. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to install something called as Angular CLI. So this Angular CLI is going to play a very important role in creating our very first Angular application. Okay, let's go ahead and install Angular CLI. Now that we already have npm present inside our system, we need to run a command such as this one. Yep, this is a command that I have currently written on my screen, which says sudo npm install space -g @angular/CLI. What this is going to do is, this is going to install Angular CLI into your machine globally. That means at any certain point, you can actually run or execute the commands of Angular CLI from any location on your system, and it will absolutely work fine. If you are on Linux or Mac, you might need to add the command sudo before you actually run this command because it's a global type installation. Whereas if you are on Windows, you might not require the sudo command at all in case if you're using PowerShell or whether you're using command prompt. In case if you're not the administrator of your computer, in case of Windows users, you might need to give your PowerShell that access before you run this command. In my case, because I am the administrator and I'm using a MacBook, I will be using the sudo command as well. So I'll press return, and as you can see, it is requiring for my password. Let me just write that down. And as soon as I press enter, you will see that an installation will begin onto my terminal. This installation will make sure that I have Angular CLI installed on my machine, which can be accessed from any location onto my machine. Okay, let's wait for this to finish. And now it has finished. Great. Let's go ahead and let's try to create our very first Angular application. To create our very first Angular application, we will have to firstly go to the path where we want to create our Angular application. Let's go to that path. So in my case, my path is going to be inside this folder. So let us try to write a command for creating our Angular application. Now that we have installed Angular CLI onto our machine, we will be using Angular CLI in order to install our or create our very first Angular application. So the command to create an Angular application, it should be on my system, and it looks something like this. Okay, so whenever we installed the Angular CLI, we got the access to a command called as ng, where n for nest and g for, let's say, great. Okay, so we got access to a command called as ng. Now, whenever we want to make use of any Angular related stuff, we will be making use of the ng command. So now that we want to create our very first application, we will be using ng space new, which is going to tell that we have to create a new app and then write the name of the application. So in this case, the name of my application is tutorac-angular-app. So let me press return or enter. Then it will ask me a very basic question that which style sheet format would you like to use? CSS, SASS or SCSS? Or yeah, these are the three options that I have. I will go ahead with the simpler CSS only. And then it is asking me, do you want to enable server-side rendering and static site generation? Well, in this case, I will go with N and press return. Now you can see that it has created a lot of files and now it is trying to install a few packages. Based on your internet speed, this can take some amount of time. Usually, even in case of React, whenever you try to create your first application in React or Angular, because there are a lot of dependencies that require to be downloaded, so on the basis of your internet speed, it can vary how much time it takes. In my case, it is still installing, so we will wait until the installation finishes. In the meantime, you can put up your questions in case if you have any into the comment section, and I will try to answer as soon as I can find them. All right, there are no questions as of now, but in case if you have any, please feel free to write them down. In my case, the installation has successfully finished, which is wonderful. Now let's go ahead and try to open this particular project into our code editor. I am using Visual Studio Code for my convenience. You can choose any code editor of your choice. I will close my terminal right now. And now I will open Visual Studio Code. And here we are. And let me just open this folder that we have just created. So I'll go to open folder. I will go to my path where I have created this. It will be present inside A, then inside self, then tutorac Angular app. So this is where our project is currently present. All right, wonderful. So this is our very first Angular application. Inside our Angular application, you will see something called as src, which is going to contain our entire application's code. Then we have something called as app, which is called as app, and this app is going to contain all the important logic which is concerned with our Angular code. So if I open this, you will see quite a lot of files. You will see a .css file, .html file, .spec.ts file, and a .ts file. And then you will see a config file and a routes file. What are these things? So a routes file is used for routing inside a front-end application. You might want to actually configure multiple pages inside your Angular application. Let's say you're trying to create a website called as www.mycompany.com and you want to add a contact us page or an about us page. So you want, or you have a design created inside your code, and you want that whenever somebody goes to mycompany.com/about us, they are able to be redirected to a different page where they see a information of your own company. So this concept is called as routing. In our case, we are not going to go as deep into routing as of now, but we will be discussing these concepts slightly later. But right now, I just wanted to tell you that all the routing related concepts are written inside this particular file. And next, we have something called as app.config.ts. Inside this, we write all the configurations that are related with our application. And then we have app.component.ts, which is going to represent a component inside, or I should say that it is going to represent the business logic of the component that you're trying to create. Spec.ts file is actually test cases for that certain component. .html is actually the UI part of that certain component, and .css is actually the style part of that certain component. So this is what each of these files mean. Now I'm pretty sure you might be introduced to a new word altogether, which is called as component. And in the last 2 minutes, I think I have mentioned component probably more than 10 times already. So what is a component? Whenever we talk about modern front-end engineering, especially talking about technologies like React and Angular, we will always hear a word like component. What is the meaning of component? A component is a reusable piece of code or a reusable unit of code which is going to be, which can be reused. That is the simplest way that I can tell what is a component. A component is a basic piece of code that is supposed to be reused at multiple places. I'll give you an example. Suppose you write a function inside any programming language. This function will have a return type. This function will have a name. This function will have some arguments as input, right? And then this function will provide some sort of computational logic. And then this function will return something, right? So you can use this function wherever you require, right? You can just pass the arguments and call the function. Whenever you call the function, you will get a value as return, right? Something similar happens in a component. Whenever you have a certain piece of UI that you want to repeat at multiple places, you put that information inside a component. And every single time you call that component, that same piece of UI will appear on the screen. And these components also have input parameters with the help of which you can control the information present inside these components on the basis of the use case that you might have. So this is what a component means. And every component has something called as a life cycle. We will go into life cycles and understand components slightly deeper, probably later in this video or maybe inside a course. But right now, what I want to tell you is basic introduction to a component. So that is what a component means. And a component can be present inside another component as well, especially when you want to run it. Just like you can run a piece of function from any other function and so on and on. All right, let's go ahead and try to create our very first component. But before we create our component, we have to create something called as a module inside an Angular application. A module is a sub app inside an Angular application, which is a kind of a categorization to multiple types of components. It has a lot of configurations, because of which it is a good practice to put all of your components at least inside one module. So because we are going to create our very first component, we will create a module first. Okay, let us create a module. So I have opened my terminal inside my Angular application, and then I will write some extra command in order to create our module. So in order to create a module, I will start with writing ng, which is again for Angular. Then I will write g, which stands for generate, then m, which stands for module, and then I will write, let's say, basic, which is the name of my module. As soon as I do this, you will see a new folder getting created inside the app folder, and the name of the folder is basically the name that I actually put into the command field. So it is basic. Now inside basic.module.ts, this is the kind of code that we are currently seeing. Okay, nice. Now we will have to go ahead and start to create our component. So I want to create my component inside the module basic. So what I will do is I will write ng space g space c, which means ng generate component. And then I will write that inside app, I want a component called as counter. And you can see that inside basic, no, I think I made a mistake. I created it by mistake inside the app. Let me just fix it. So I will remove this folder, and 1 second. Yep, that folder has, okay, I think I made a small mistake. All right, you know what I'll do is I will, yeah, I think I'm still good to go. Yeah, this folder is redundant. Okay, let's try to create the module again. So this is our module and this is our component. So inside the basic component or inside the basic module, I wanted to create my counter component. So I'll write basic/counter. And now inside the basic folder, I will see a new folder called as counter, which is representing my component. Okay, now if I open this, you will see again there are 4 files. But I think this time you will understand each of these 4 files might mean. So there's a CSS file for styling, HTML file for structure, spec.ts file for test, and .ts file for business logic. Okay, let's go ahead and try to print this component or show this component on the screen. But before that, there's one very interesting thing that we forgot to do, that is to run our Angular application. So in order to run your Angular application, you have to write ng serve, S-E-R-V-E, and press enter. So as soon as we press enter, it will start your localhost 4200, which you can view on a browser. So this is our browser. Let me just write localhost 4200, and this is the code that we are seeing. Hello TutorAC Angular app, and it says congratulations, your app is running. Well, wonderful. Let's go ahead and try to add some extra code inside this particular web page on the basis of a component. So this is our component. If I go to the HTML file of this component, it has a paragraph tag which says counter works. I will remove it and I will write an h1 tag. Not like this. I will write an h1 tag, and here I will write this is, let's say, hi, I am Shantanu. I've written, hi, I am Shantanu. And what I will do is I will have to export this component from my module so that other people can consume it. So I'll write exports, and inside it I will, inside this I will basically export my counter component. Okay, so now that it is getting exported. Now I will go back to my app config.ts, and here everything seems fine. Here also everything seems fine. And yep, everything is okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to my app.html file, and here I will start to print my component. Okay, so we are here. Let's try to write app-component. Sorry, app-counter. Okay, once we run it, we see that there is an error. It says app-counter is not a known element. Why is this error coming? This error should not be coming, right? The reason why this error is coming because this our certain app component does not understand what is a counter component. So we definitely exported our counter component from the basic module, but we did not import it at the app level in order to let the app understand what the counter component means. So we will have to import it over here. So we will write counter component. Okay, so save it and go back to my browser, and now you can see, hi, I am Shantanu getting printed. Great, right? Now what I will do is, because I told you that a component is a reusable piece of code, I will copy it and paste it, let's say many times, and as many times I paste it, that many times I see, hi, I am Shantanu. You can see the reusability of your component straight away. All right, nice. But I want to actually create something more interesting. Let's say that I named this component as counter, right? So what is it supposed to do? Let's say that I add a value, let's say a count, whose initial value is going to be 0. And I want to increase its count every single time an increase button is clicked. And I want to decrease its count every single time a decrease button is clicked. Let's go ahead and try to write this down. Okay, so for doing this, what I will be doing is I will go to my component.html, or I will go to my counter.component.ts, and here I will create a variable called as count is equals to 0. Okay, so count is going to be a number. Okay, so I've written count, a number is equals to 0, and then I will create a function, let's say on button click, or let's say on increase click. On increase click, it's a function, or I can also write it like this, and I'll make it an arrow function. Okay, and here I will write this dot count plus plus. Okay, so as you can see, I'm maintaining a variable called as count inside this component. Now, because this variable is maintained inside the component, I can actually access it inside the component's HTML file. So in order to do that, I will say, let's say a paragraph, and I will say the count is, and now that I want to access the variable which is present inside my component, I will write count like this. So now if I go ahead, you will see the count is 0, right? You will see that the count is 0. Okay, so how is this coming? So, and how is it reading the value 0? It is coming as 0 on the basis of the value which is present inside the counter component's basic code. Okay, and now we have on increase click. So I will go inside my HTML file and I will create a new button. And inside this button, I will write, let's say increase. This is the name of the button. And now I want to add an event listener into this particular button so that it can increase the count by 1. So in basic HTML, we would write an on-click function. But whenever we actually write the code in Angular, we need to write the event handler like this. So we will write click and is equal to, and then we will write the name of the function. So I will write on increase click. I'll save it. I'll go back. I'll refresh it. And if I click on increase, you can see that the value is increasing right now. But at the same time, if I click on this increase, only this component's value is increasing. The rest are still at 0. So as you can see, there are multiple copies of the same component. And when you change one component, it doesn't necessarily have to change the other component also. Which is why I wanted to bring about the concept of reusability of code, which is why components are there in the first place. And now we have also demonstrated it. Wonderful. Okay, so this is how our function is working. But what if I also want to put a decrease functionality into my code? So we will create, let's say, one more button, and I will write button, and over here I will write click, and here I will pass a new function name, let's say on decrease click. On decrease click, okay, and here I will pass decrease. Okay, so we are seeing an error that there is nothing called as on decrease click inside the function. So I'll go back to my component and here I will write on decrease click as a function which does nothing but this dot count minus minus. I'll save it. Now that we have a decrease click also, so increase and decrease. Okay. Now let's say we want to add one more functionality that we don't want the counter to go less than 0, you know. We just want 0 at the least. Okay, so let's try to do that. So here I will write if this dot count is currently less than or let's say it's more than 0, only then this dot count minus minus will happen. Okay, wrong code, minus minus will happen. Minus minus and save. Okay, let's try to do it now. So if I click on increase, fine. If I click on decrease, you can see that it stops at 0. Okay, wonderful. Now I want to optimize it slightly more. And what I want to do is that I want to actually make just one function, let's say something called as on button click, and then control whether it was increase button or decrease button. So let me just try to do that. I'll write on button click. On button click, let's say it takes an argument, let's say type, which is going to be a string. Okay, and if the type is, let's say increase, then it's going to do something. Else if type is decrease, then it's going to do something else. Okay, so if it's increase type, we're just going to click on, or we can just call that this dot on increase click. This dot on increase click, we can just call it, and otherwise we can write this dot on decrease click. Okay, so we can make it like a public function, which is by default public. Okay, and we will make these private functions, private and private. In case if you are very new to this, these are called access modifiers, but we see a little bit of an error because we are using these two functions inside the component. If we go to the component over here, and if you write on button click, and here also I'll write on button click, then also we see the error coming up on the screen. Okay, so we can just follow a different kind of an approach. I will remove these two things. Okay, and I will also remove this. I will save it, and after this what I will do is I will write this dot count, because that's what the increase function was doing, plus plus, and here I will write if this dot count is greater than 0, then this dot count minus minus. Okay, so this is what we have done. Now coming back to counter.component.html, here I can just pass the variables. So this is going to increase and this is going to decrease. save it, go back, refresh, and now if you click on increase, it increases. If you click on decrease, it decreases. All right. I can also show you one very interesting thing. You can go to the development tools of your browser, go to, let's say, sources, and after going to sources, you can actually see the file inside your browser's console window as well. Let's say I want to debug this counter.component.ts, so I can put up a breakpoint over here, and as soon as I click on increase, you can see the entire debugging scenario at this browser window. So you can also debug your Angular applications just like you would be able to debug your applications in general. All right. So this was pretty much it from my side in this particular video about Angular. And now, in case if you have any questions, I can take them. Let me just go to the comment section and see in case if there are any questions. So until right now, I don't see any major questions so far, but that's okay. In case if you have any questions, you can try to put them down inside the live chat. All right, wonderful. In case if you also have any questions later in the video, you can always feel free to write the questions down in the comment section, and I will try to get to them as soon as I can. Please feel free to write even the silliest questions that you might have and give us a chance to answer your questions. Until then, I will take your leave for today's live video, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay connected with us at TutorRack.